You will confess before my son dies, or I will see you hanged. The Duke of Blackmere threw Marianne's leather herb journal onto the dining table. Its brass clasp struck the polished oak with a crack that silenced every servant in the room. Upstairs, 10-year-old Arthur struggled for breath. Below, the remnants of the Duke's birthday banquet stood untouched beneath the chandeliers. Cooling venison, overturned crystal, and a silver cup stained with the tonic Marianne had prepared for the boy. 2 guards moved to either side of her. Marianne Blackmere looked across the table at her husband. 7 years earlier, Julian had placed his life in her hands after a hunting accident left an arrowhead buried beneath his ribs. Tonight, he would not trust her long enough to examine a cup. I will confess to nothing, she said. Arthur needs me in his chamber. He needs protection from you. Lady Viola Ashcombe stood beside Julian, one pale hand pressed dramatically to her throat. She had arrived at Blackmere 6 months earlier as the recently widowed daughter of Julian's political patron. Since then, she had mastered the art of appearing fragile precisely when she wanted power. I saw Marianne add something to Arthur's tonic, Viola said. She looked around before she did it. I measured willow bark and feverfew, Marianne replied. The same preparation I have given him since he was 6. And foxglove? Julian demanded. A servant placed a small glass vial beside Marianne's journal. She recognized her medicine case immediately, but not the bottle allegedly found inside it. It was blue. Her tinctures were stored in brown glass to protect them from sunlight. Every bottle carried her wax seal and an entry number matching the dispensary ledger. This one had neither. Julian mistook her silence for guilt. You denied me an heir of my own, he said, his voice low enough to wound more deeply than a shout. Was Arthur's existence finally more than you could endure? Marianne felt the accusation travel through the room. Several servants lowered their eyes. Arthur was Julian's orphan nephew and the legal heir presumptive to Blackmere. Marianne had raised him from infancy. She had sat beside him through scarlet fever, taught him to identify medicinal leaves, and held him after nightmares about the carriage accident that killed his parents. Julian knew all of that. He had chosen to say the words anyway. Our childlessness does not make me a murderer. Something flickered in his expression. Shame, perhaps. But Viola touched his sleeve before it could become doubt. Your Grace, every moment we argue is another moment Arthur suffers. Marianne turned to the elderly physician waiting near the fireplace. Dr. Heir, tell him, the boy's numb fingers and difficulty breathing are inconsistent with the amount of foxglove supposedly found in that cup. Heir opened his mouth, but Julian cut him off. You are confined to the West Wing until the magistrate arrives. And who will treat Arthur? Dr. Heir. He does not know the pattern of Arthur's symptoms. I know enough to recognize poison, Heir said, though his gaze remained fixed upon the floor. That frightened Marianne more than Julian's fury. Heir was cautious, not cowardly. Someone had given him a reason to remain silent. The guards escorted her from the dining room. Before crossing the threshold, Marianne glanced once more at the blue vial. A white number had been painted near its base, Strevii. It was not an apothecary mark. She had seen the same Roman numerals during the annual inventory of the Blackmere Chapel. The bottle belonged to the sacristy. By midnight, Marianne had lost access to her patient, her dispensary, and the husband who had once trusted her hands with his own life. Captain Reeves locked her inside the old schoolroom in the West Wing. A fire had been lit, but the tall windows admitted enough winter air to make the candles tremble. Her maid Elsie waited until the captain's footsteps faded. His Grace has placed Lady Viola in charge of the sick room, she whispered. She dismissed Nurse Bell and ordered all of Master Arthur's bedding burned. Marianne turned sharply. Burned? She claimed it might be contaminated. Bedding could carry evidence, vomit, perspiration, traces of whatever Arthur had swallowed. Destroying it protected no patient. It protected the poisoner. Go to my chamber, Marianne said. Bring me the gray traveling cloak, clean gloves, and the smallest blade from my embroidery box. You cannot leave. There are guards at both staircases. I am not leaving yet. When Elsie returned, Marianne carefully cut open the inner seam of her cloak. Years ago, while traveling through villages where physicians refused to treat the poor, she had sewn emergency instruments into its lining. A narrow silver probe remained hidden there. She worked it into the schoolroom lock. The mechanism yielded just before 1 in the morning. Marianne moved through the unlit corridor, keeping close to the paneled wall. Voices drifted from Arthur's chamber. Viola was speaking to Dr. Heir. The Duke must not be disturbed, she said. If the boy wakes, give him this. A drawer closed. Marianne waited until Viola left by the eastern passage, then slipped into the sick room. Arthur lay beneath a linen sheet, his face gray against the pillow. His pulse was rapid but uneven. His pupils contracted normally when Marianne lifted the candle. That made a fatal dose of foxglove less likely. She examined his fingertips. Beneath one nail was a faint smear of blue wax. Not glass. Wax. "Arthur," she whispered. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. Marianne moistened his lips with water. "What happened before you drank the tonic?" "I didn't—" His voice was barely audible. "Didn't drink it." She froze. "Then what did you take?" "Sweet?" From the chapel. Footsteps approached outside. Marianne leaned closer. "Who gave it to you?" Arthur's hand emerged from beneath the sheet and caught her wrist with surprising strength. "The blue bottle," he whispered. "A lady hid it behind St. Michael." "Which lady?" His eyes moved toward the door. Marianne heard the key enter the lock from the other side. Then an unseen hand seized Arthur by the shoulders and pulled him backward into the darkness behind the bed curtains. Marianne lunged through the curtains and caught Arthur's wrist before his body disappeared between the bed and the paneled wall. A narrow door stood open behind the headboard. Someone in a dark servant's coat had seized the boy beneath his arms and was dragging him into a hidden passage. Marianne drove her shoulder against the intruder's chest. The figure released Arthur, stumbled backward, and struck the passage wall. A sharp scent clung to the coat, orange blossom and cloves. Marianne had smelled it that evening on Lady Viola's gloves. The key turned in the chamber door. Marianne pulled Arthur onto the bed, just as the intruder fled through the passage. She reached for the concealed door, but it slammed shut from within. The panel blended perfectly into the carved oak. Captain Reeves entered with 2 guards. Behind him stood Viola. Marianne remained between them and Arthur. "There is someone inside the wall." Viola's gaze moved briefly toward the closed panel. "The strain has affected your reason. Search the passage." "There is no passage," Captain Reeves said. Marianne tore back the curtain and pressed along the carving until she found a shallow indentation. The panel opened several inches, revealing a black corridor beyond. Reeves's face hardened. "Take a lantern." One guard entered while the other examined the space behind the bed. Moments later, the first man returned carrying a strip of black wool. "The passage ends at a servant's staircase," he reported. The outer door was open. Viola folded her hands. "Then the Duchess used it to escape confinement." Marianne stared at her. "I was already inside this room when Arthur was attacked." "According to whom?" Arthur stirred. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. Viola approached the bed. Marianne blocked her path. "Do not touch him. You have no authority here." "I have enough authority to prevent you from destroying another piece of evidence." Julian's voice sounded from the doorway. "What evidence?" He entered without a coat, his dark hair disordered as though someone had pulled him from sleep. Exhaustion shadowed his face, but suspicion sharpened it when he saw Marianne. "Captain Reeves told me you escaped. Someone tried to abduct Arthur through a hidden passage." Julian examined the open panel. For the first time that night, uncertainty disturbed his anger. "Who knows of this corridor?" "It was used by nursery servants generations ago," Reeves said. "Most of the household believes it was sealed." "Most?" Marianne repeated. "Who knew it remained open?" The captain hesitated. "The household steward. Perhaps the senior servants." "And Lady Viola?" Marianne asked. Viola gave a wounded laugh. "I have lived here for 6 months. How could I know the secrets of a house that has belonged to your family for centuries?" Arthur began coughing. Marianne turned immediately. A sweet odor escaped his breath. Almonds and burnt sugar. Not foxglove. Something had been concealed in a confection and given to him before the banquet. "He needs powdered charcoal and warm water," she said. "Now." Julian looked toward Dr. Hale, who had just arrived. The physician nodded reluctantly. "It may help absorb what remains in his stomach. Then prepare it," Julian ordered. "I will prepare it," Marianne said. "Arthur told me he ate a sweet from the chapel. The tonic was planted to direct suspicion toward me." Viola's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened around the folds of her skirt. Julian noticed. His gaze moved from Viola to Marianne, then to the unconscious child. "You will remain under guard," he decided. "But you may assist Dr. Hale until Arthur is stable." It was not an apology, it was not trust. Still, it gave Marianne access to the boy. For the next hour, she worked beside Hale, while Julian watched from the hearth. Arthur resisted the charcoal mixture at first, but Marianne spoke softly until he swallowed. His pulse gradually steadied, and warmth returned to his hands. When Julian stepped into the corridor to question Reeves, Hale caught Marianne's sleeve. "You must stop asking about the chapel," he whispered. "Why?" His face had lost all color. "Because Arthur was not the first person to fall ill after taking something from there." Marianne waited. Hale glanced toward Viola, who stood near the window. 3 weeks ago, a kitchen maid came to me with vomiting, numbness, and a strange taste in her mouth. She said she had eaten a sugared almond left beside the altar. Where is she now? Dismissed. Lady Viola accused her of theft. Her name? Bess Turner. Marianne knew the girl. Bess had worked at Blackmere since she was 14 and sent most of her wages to a widowed mother in the northern village. Did you record her symptoms? Yes, but the page disappeared from my case. The same pattern had been developing for weeks. Someone had tested the poison on a servant before using it on Arthur. Marianne looked toward the bedside table. The blue vial had been placed there beside a folded cloth. Under the candlelight, she noticed a thin gold thread caught around its neck. It matched the embroidery on the chapel altar covering. She reached for it. Viola moved faster. Her sleeve struck the table, knocking the vial to the floor. Blue glass shattered across the boards. Oh! Viola stepped back. How terribly clumsy of me. Marianne knelt among the fragments before anyone could sweep them away. The bottle was lost, but the painted number remained visible on one curved piece. Julian 70. She wrapped it in her handkerchief. Julian returned and saw the broken glass. What happened? Your wife attempted to take the evidence, Viola said. Marianne rose. Then let Captain Reeves search the chapel and compare this number with its inventory. Julian's jaw tightened. Viola placed a trembling hand against his arm. Arthur needs peace. Must this house be torn apart because she invents another accusation? Julian looked down at Viola's hand. A single strand of gold thread clung to the pearl button of her glove. This time he saw it. Before he could speak, the chapel bell began to toll. Once, twice, then a footman burst into the sick room, breathless and terrified. Your Grace, the chapel doors were locked from the inside. We forced them open. He looked directly at Marianne. There is a woman lying behind the altar, and she is wearing the Duchess's cloak. Marianne looked down at the gray traveling cloak draped over her shoulders. It was hers, but so was the one in the chapel. That is impossible, Elsie whispered from the doorway. I took the cloak from her Grace's wardrobe myself. Julian's expression hardened. Come with me. He ordered Captain Reeves to guard Arthur, then led Marianne, Viola, Dr. Hale, and 4 footmen downstairs. No one spoke as they crossed the dark gallery. The chapel bell had stopped, but its final vibration seemed to linger inside the stone walls. The doors stood splintered around the broken lock. Candles burned along the nave, although the chapel had supposedly been sealed since dawn. Behind the altar lay a young woman in Marianne's gray cloak, her face concealed by the hood. Marianne knelt and drew back the fabric. Bess Turner. The dismissed kitchen maid was alive, but barely. Bruises circled her throat, and blue wax stained the corner of her mouth. Dr. Hale bent beside her. Her pulse is weak. Bring her to a warm room, Marianne ordered. Do not give her anything until I examine her. Julian caught Marianne's arm. How did she obtain your cloak? This is not mine. It bears your initials. He turned back the collar. The letters MB had been embroidered into the lining. Marianne examined the stitching. The thread was new and bright, unlike the faded silver used on her clothing. Whoever had copied the cloak expected it to be identified quickly. She was dressed to look like me, Marianne said. If the bell had not drawn witnesses here, someone might have carried her outside and claimed I died while escaping. Or she assisted you, Viola suggested. Perhaps you arranged this scene after learning she had survived your first attempt to poison her. Dr. Hale rose abruptly. Lady Viola, Bess became ill 3 weeks before tonight. And who treated her? Viola asked. Silence answered. Marianne saw Julian's uncertainty retreat behind wounded pride. He had publicly accused his wife. Accepting that he might be wrong now required him to admit how willingly he had condemned her. Viola understood that weakness. She stepped closer to him. Your Grace, Marianne escaped a locked room, entered Arthur's chamber through a secret passage, and now her clothing is found on another poisoned victim. How many coincidences must we accept? Julian looked at Marianne. Return to the West Wing until I determine the truth. The truth is lying at your feet, and every piece of evidence points toward you, because someone placed it there. His grip tightened around her arm. You expect me to believe the entire household conspires against you? No. Only that one person is exploiting your eagerness to distrust me. The words struck him. His fingers released her. For one suspended moment, Marianne saw the man who had once respected her intelligence. Then Viola gave a soft, wounded breath, and Julian looked away. Marianne turned toward the statue of St. Michael. Its marble base showed fresh scratches. She pressed both hands against it, but the statue did not move. Captain Reeves, help me. Together they shifted it several inches from the wall. A shallow compartment had been carved into the stone behind it. It was empty. Only a circular stain of blue wax remained on the shelf. The bottle was here, Marianne said. Reeves lifted his lantern. There are scratches inside the compartment. Something else may have been stored beside it. Marianne reached into the narrow space. Her fingertips touched a folded piece of paper pushed deep into one corner. Viola moved toward her. That belongs to the chapel. Marianne withdrew it first. The paper was part of an inventory sheet listing ceremonial oils, silver vessels, and bottles numbered I through XX. Beside number XVII appeared a single word, aconite. The quantity had been amended from 1 vial to 4. The alteration carried Julian's signature. Marianne handed it to him. Did you authorize this? Julian studied the page. Viola asked permission to replace several damaged chapel oils before the bishop's visit. You signed without checking what she purchased? She said the steward had approved the list. Viola's face flushed. I know nothing about medicines. The supplier must have made an error. Aconite is not a ceremonial oil, Marianne said. It can cause numbness, vomiting, an irregular heartbeat, and death. It also has a bitter taste that can be disguised by almonds. Arthur's symptoms, Bess's symptoms. Julian stared at his signature, as though seeing the consequences of it for the first time. Before he could question Viola, Bess convulsed. Marianne dropped beside her and loosened the cloak at her throat. Something hard pressed beneath the maid's bodice. She removed a small ledger wrapped in linen. Bess's eyes opened. Don't let her burn it, she gasped. Who? Bess tried to raise one trembling finger toward the people gathered around the altar. A sharp crack split the air. One of the chapel windows shattered. A burning object struck the carpet beside Marianne, spraying sparks across the dry fabric. Fire! A footman shouted. Flames climbed the altar curtains. Reeves dragged Bess toward the nave while the servants rushed for water. Smoke rolled across the ceiling, turning the chapel into confusion. Marianne held the ledger beneath her cloak and crawled away from the burning carpet. Through the smoke, she saw Viola slip toward the side door. Julian saw her too. Viola! He shouted. Stop! She broke into a run. Julian followed, leaving Marianne surrounded by flames with the poisoned maid, and the only record someone was willing to kill to destroy. Then Marianne opened the ledger. Every payment inside had been authorized with the Duke of Blackmere's seal, including one made that morning for the preparation of Arthur's coffin. Marianne tore the page from the ledger, folded it into her bodice, and shoved the book beneath the stone altar. A burning curtain collapsed where she had been kneeling. Get Bess outside, she shouted. Captain Reeves lifted the maid while 2 footmen cleared a path through the smoke. Marianne followed, but a flaming beam crashed across the center aisle, separating her from the doors. Your Grace! Elsie screamed from the nave. I can reach the vestry! Marianne wrapped her cloak across her mouth and moved along the wall. Heat pressed against her skin. Above her, sparks showered from the timber roof. The vestry door refused to open. She struck it with her shoulder once, twice, then realized it had been secured from the other side. Someone had locked every escape route except the door Viola had used. Marianne seized a brass candle stand and drove its base through the small stained glass window. She knocked away the remaining shards, climbed onto a prayer bench, and forced herself through the narrow opening. Hands caught her outside. Julian lowered her to the ground. Soot blackened his face, and blood ran from a cut across his palm. Are you hurt? You left me inside. The accusation stopped him more effectively than a blow. I thought you were behind me. You did not look. Behind them, servants formed a line from the courtyard well to the chapel. Water struck the flames, sending clouds of steam through the shattered windows. Viola was nowhere in sight. Did you catch her? Marianne asked. Julian looked toward the garden gate. She had a horse waiting beyond the yew-walk. Then her escape was prepared. She could not have known the chapel would burn. She knew because the fire was meant to destroy Bess, the inventory, and this. Marianne drew the folded page from her bodice. Julian read the entry beneath the courtyard lantern. One child's oak coffin, black lining, delivery before sunrise. The payment bore his ducal seal. I never ordered this, but you gave Viola access to the seal, only for chapel expenses. You gave her your authority without supervision. She used it to purchase poison, silence a witness, and prepare for Arthur's death. Julian stared at the document. The seal could have been copied. Perhaps, but you signed the altered inventory yourself. His face tightened. I trusted the daughter of a man who secured 3 parliamentary votes for Blackmere, and distrusted the wife who saved your estate from fever, treated your tenants without payment, and raised Arthur as her own. I was told you resented the boy. You wanted to believe it. The truth settled between them with the weight of the burning chapel. Julian had not mixed the poison or planted the vial, but when Viola offered him a version of Marianne shaped around his deepest resentment, their childlessness, he had accepted it because it made his private anger feel justified. Captain Reeves approached. The fire is contained. We found the remains of a glass bottle near the broken eastern window. It held lamp oil. The attacker threw it from outside, Marianne said. Search the grounds before the tracks are destroyed. I have already sent men. And close every gate. Viola may still have an accomplice inside the estate. Julian did not challenge her authority this time. Bess had been carried into the steward's office. Marianne examined her beneath the light of 6 candles, while Dr. Hale prepared warm water. The maid's breathing remained shallow, but the convulsions had stopped. Bess, can you hear me? Her eyes opened halfway. The ledger, she whispered. It is safe. Bess swallowed painfully. Lady Viola dismissed me after I saw Mr. Crowther carry blue bottles into the chapel. Edwin Crowther? Julian asked from the doorway. His estate solicitor had served Blackmere for 12 years. He controlled settlements, leases, and documents concerning the succession. Bess nodded. He said they were oils. 1 bottle broke. I touched the liquid while cleaning it, then became ill. Lady Viola sent me away before I could speak to her grace. How did you return tonight? Marianne asked. A letter came to my mother's cottage. It promised £20 if I brought back the paper I took. What paper? Bess reached inside her sleeve, but found it empty. Terror widened her eyes. They took it. What did it say? Mr. Crowther wrote that the boy must die before the Duke changes the settlement. Julian stepped closer. What settlement? The one naming Lady Viola's child as heir. No one spoke. Viola was a widow with no publicly acknowledged child. Marianne looked at Julian. Is she pregnant? His silence answered before his lips did. She told me 6 weeks ago, he said. She claimed the child was mine. Pain passed through Marianne, cold and precise. The poisoning, the accusation, and Julian's eagerness to condemn her suddenly shared one foundation. You believed her. Julian lowered his gaze. Yes. And you intended to set me aside? I had not decided. You had already consulted Crowther. He could not deny it. Bess gripped Marianne's hand. The letter said the boy's death would remove the last obstacle. But there was another name beneath Crowther's. Whose? Before Bess could answer, the office door swung open. Captain Reeves entered holding a riding glove recovered near the garden gate. It was embroidered with Viola's initials, but it was far too large for a woman's hand. The hoofprints do not lead away from Blackmere, he said. They circle back to the northern wing. A heavy crash sounded above them. Julian looked toward the ceiling. My private study. They ran upstairs. The study door stood open. Papers covered the floor. The ducal seal was missing, and the iron strongbox containing Arthur's guardianship settlement had been forced apart. Across Julian's desk lay a fresh legal declaration. It announced Arthur's death and named Lady Viola's unborn child as the next heir to Blackmere. At the bottom appeared Julian's perfect signature. The ink was still wet. Julian touched the signature without disturbing the wet ink. It is an exact imitation. Marianne examined the declaration. The handwriting resembled his, but the final stroke beneath Blackmere curved upward. Julian's authentic signature ended with a sharp downward line. Someone practiced this, she said. Search Crowther's office. Captain Reeves dispatched 2 guards, then inspected the broken strongbox. The lock was opened with a key before the front plate was damaged. Whoever did this wanted it to appear forced. Only Julian, Marianne, Crowther, and the late Dowager Duchess had possessed keys. Marianne looked at the empty space where the guardianship settlement had been stored. What did the missing document contain? It named Arthur heir to the unentailed lands and placed his inheritance under my control until he turned 21, Julian replied. And if Arthur died? The properties would pass according to my revised will, which Crowther prepared. Julian's face darkened. A guard appeared with a message. Crowther's office had been cleared. His ledgers, correspondence, and personal seal were gone. His carriage remained in the stable, but no one had seen him since dinner. He is still here, Marianne said. The gates were closed before he could leave. Captain Reeves ordered a search of the northern wing. Marianne lifted the forged declaration toward the candlelight. The paper bore a faint watermark shaped like a crown surrounded by thorns. This did not come from your study. Julian recognized it. Ashcombe paper. Viola's father uses it for political correspondence. Lord Ashcombe had secured Julian's position in Parliament and encouraged the proposed revision of Arthur's inheritance. If Viola's unborn child became heir to Blackmere, her father's family would gain control of the estate. This scheme is larger than an affair and a frightened widow, Marianne said. Julian flinched at the word affair. I will correct what I have done. You cannot correct it by making another declaration in private. You accused me before witnesses. You surrendered my dispensary, questioned my sanity, and threatened me with hanging. I know. No, Julian. You have only begun to know. Marianne folded the forged paper and handed it to Reeves. Keep this on your person. Give it to no one without my presence. The captain glanced at Julian. Do as she says, the Duke ordered. A scream echoed from the floor below. They found Elsie outside Arthur's room, struggling against a masked man in a servant's coat. He released her and ran toward the hidden passage. Reeves pursued him. Marianne entered the chamber. Arthur's bed was empty. The window stood open, and a rope hung from the sill. Julian crossed to it. They took him. No. Marianne touched the rope. It was dry, despite the rain beginning outside. This was placed here earlier. They want us searching the grounds. A faint scraping came from behind the wall. Julian opened the concealed panel. Marianne took a candle, and they entered the passage together. The corridor descended beneath the nursery. Drops of blood marked the steps, followed by fragments of blue wax. At the bottom, the passage divided. One path led toward the chapel. The other continued beneath the northern wing. Marianne noticed a small wooden horse lying near the second path. Arthur always kept it beside his pillow. This way. They followed the trail into a disused wine cellar. Arthur sat bound to a chair, conscious but trembling. Beside him stood Edwin Crowther, holding a pistol. Lady Viola was nowhere in sight. Put down the candle, Crowther ordered. Marianne obeyed. Julian stepped in front of her. Release the boy. You should have signed the new settlement when Lord Ashcombe first demanded it, Crowther said. Instead, you hesitated over your wife's objections. Now we must finish this without your cooperation. Arthur looked at Marianne. The lady in the chapel wasn't Lady Viola. Crowther struck the boy across the face. Julian lunged forward, but the solicitor cocked the pistol. Another step, Your Grace, and Blackmere loses both heirs tonight. Both? Marianne asked. Crowther smiled. A door opened behind them. Viola entered, pale and disheveled, with one hand pressed over her abdomen. You fools, she said. There is no child. Then a man wearing Lord Ashcombe's signet ring stepped from the darkness and placed a knife against Viola's throat. But there will still be an heir. The man removed his hood. Julian recoiled. Nathaniel Ashcombe. Viola's elder brother tightened the knife against her throat. Unlike his sister, Nathaniel held no legitimate place in Lord Ashcombe's succession. A secret first marriage had rendered his birth disputed, and Parliament had rejected his claim years earlier. Our father promised me Blackmere instead, Nathaniel said. Your lands, your parliamentary influence, and eventually your title. A disputed son cannot inherit my dukedom, Julian replied. No, but Viola's son could, if enough respectable witnesses believed you fathered him. Viola's face twisted with rage. There was never supposed to be a murder. Father told me Arthur would be sent abroad after Julian set Marianne aside. Crowther laughed. And you believed him because vanity has always been your greatest talent. Marianne understood. Viola had been used to fracture the marriage and persuade Julian to change the settlement. Once Arthur and Marianne were removed, Lord Ashcombe intended to present another child as Viola's newborn son. Where is the baby? Marianne asked. Nathaniel smiled. Already at Ashcombe House, an orphan of the correct age, purchased before his mother's body was cold. Julian's hands curled into fists. You planned to place a stranger over Blackmere. You made it possible. You gave Viola your seal, invited Crowther into your private affairs, and prepared to disinherit your wife because she could not give you a son. The truth came from an enemy, but Julian could not deny it. Marianne studied the cellar. Crowther held the pistol near Arthur, while Nathaniel stood beside a narrow table covered with documents. An oil lamp burned directly behind him. She looked at Viola. For the first time, they understood each other without words. Marianne kicked the fallen candle toward the table. Viola drove her elbow into Nathaniel's ribs. As he staggered, her sleeve struck the lamp and sent it crashing across the papers. Flames erupted. Julian rushed Crowther. The pistol fired, blasting stone from the wall. Arthur screamed and tipped sideways with the chair. Marianne dragged him away from the spreading fire. Crowther struck Julian across the jaw, but Julian seized his wrist and drove him against a wine rack. Bottles shattered around them. Nathaniel caught Viola by the hair and raised his knife. Reeves! Marianne shouted toward the passage. Nathaniel hesitated. That instant was enough. Viola pulled free and slashed his face with the broken stem of a wineglass. Captain Reeves and 2 guards burst into the cellar. Crowther was forced to the floor, but Nathaniel escaped through the door behind the table before the guards could reach him. Take Crowther alive, Marianne ordered. He knows where Lord Ashcombe keeps the child. She cut Arthur's bindings and examined him. His cheek was bruised, but his pulse remained steady. Did they make you eat anything? He shook his head. Mr. Crowther wanted me awake to sign a letter. What letter? One saying Aunt Marianne poisoned me because she hated father. Julian knelt beside him. Arthur, I am sorry. The boy moved closer to Marianne. It was a small action, but Julian looked as though he had been struck again. Viola stood near the burning table, blood running from her temple. She picked up a half-scorched document. This is what my father promised me. It was a marriage contract bearing Julian's copied signature. It recognized Viola as his future duchess and declared her supposed child legitimate. You knew Marianne would be imprisoned? Julian said. I knew she would be removed from Blackmere. I did not know father intended to kill her. You accused her of poisoning Arthur. Viola's eyes filled, though Marianne could not tell whether the tears came from guilt or fear. Crowther said the boy would only be made ill. I told myself Marianne would survive the scandal. You told yourself whatever allowed you to take her place, Marianne said. The cellar door slammed open. A guard entered carrying a blood-stained coat. Nathaniel reached the stable and took a horse. He is riding toward Ashcombe House. Julian rose. Prepare my carriage. You cannot go openly, Marianne warned. Lord Ashcombe has judges, magistrates, and members of Parliament in his debt. If we arrive without undeniable proof, he will claim Crowther acted alone. Crowther laughed from the floor. By sunrise, every newspaper in London will report Arthur's death and the Duchess's arrest. Marianne looked at the burning fragments on the table. Most of the evidence was turning to ash. Then Arthur reached inside his shirt and withdrew a small folded letter. I took this from Mr. Crowther's pocket when he tied me up. Marianne opened it. The letter ordered Nathaniel to kill Arthur, burn the chapel, and deliver Marianne's body before dawn. At the bottom stood Lord Ashcombe's unmistakable signature and seal. But the final line was worse. Once Blackmere is ours, dispose of Viola as you disposed of her first child. Viola snatched the letter from Marianne's hand. My first child died at birth. No, Marianne said. Your father told you he died. Viola read the final line again. Her face emptied of color. 5 years earlier, before her marriage to the late Sir Edmund Ashcombe, Viola had secretly given birth at her father's country house. Lord Ashcombe claimed the infant survived only minutes. Viola had never seen a body. The child at Ashcombe House may be yours, Marianne said. Viola pressed a hand against the wall. Then father planned this long before I came to Blackmere. He needed a child connected to his family, and a duke desperate for an heir, Julian said bitterly. I supplied the rest. Captain Reeves extinguished the remaining flames while his guards bound Crowther. The solicitor refused to speak until Marianne showed him Lord Ashcombe's letter. Nathaniel was ordered to dispose of you too, she said. If Ashcombe succeeds, you will not survive to collect your reward. Crowther's confidence faltered. The child is called Samuel, he finally admitted. He lives in the East Nursery at Ashcombe House. A nurse named Mrs. Finch has cared for him since birth. Viola closed her eyes. Mrs. Finch attended my confinement. Will she testify? Marianne asked. If we reach her alive. Julian ordered horses prepared, but Marianne stopped him. Lord Ashcombe expects you to arrive in anger. His magistrate will arrest me, Crowther will disappear, and this letter will be called a forgery. What do you propose? Bring witnesses he cannot control. Within half an hour, Julian dispatched riders to the bishop, the county coroner, and Sir Thomas Bellamy, a political rival of Lord Ashcombe. Dr. Hale remained at Blackmere with Arthur and Bess. Viola agreed to accompany Marianne, carrying the false marriage contract and her brother's glove. Before leaving, Marianne knelt beside Arthur. I need you to stay with Dr. Hale. Arthur gripped her hand. Will you come back? Yes. He looked past her toward Julian. Will he send you away if Lady Viola tells another lie? Julian heard every word. No, he said, but Arthur did not look at him. The journey to Ashcombe House took 2 hours. Rain darkened the road, and dawn began whitening the eastern sky as their carriage entered the estate. Sir Thomas and the coroner met them near the gate. The bishop's carriage followed shortly afterward. Lord Ashcombe received the party in his library, fully dressed and entirely composed. He was a silver-haired man whose pleasant manners had concealed ruthless ambition for decades. Nathaniel stood near the fireplace with a fresh bandage across his cheek. My daughter has suffered a nervous collapse, Ashcombe said. The Duchess of Blackmere manipulated her into supporting this absurd accusation. Viola stepped forward. Where is my son? For the first time, her father's composure shifted. Your child died. Then explain why Mrs. Finch has raised a boy here since the night I gave birth. Ashcombe turned to Julian. You would destroy an honorable family on the word of 2 hysterical women? Julian's shame sharpened into anger. I nearly destroyed my own family on your word. I will not repeat that mistake. Marianne placed the letter before the coroner. Ashcombe barely glanced at it. A crude forgery. Then you will not object to opening the East Nursery, Sir Thomas said. Nathaniel moved toward the door, but Reeves blocked him. The group climbed to the second floor. The east nursery was locked. Ashcombe claimed the room had been unused for years. Viola took a small key from the chain around her neck. Mrs. Finch gave me this after my confinement. Father told me it opened my child's coffin. The key turned in the nursery lock. Inside stood a neatly made bed, shelves of toys, and a bowl of warm porridge. Someone had occupied the room minutes earlier. The window was open. A rope ladder descended into the garden, where fresh carriage tracks cut through the mud toward the river road. "They have taken him," Viola whispered. Marianne searched the bedside table and found a child's drawing beneath the porridge bowl. It showed a large house, a woman in a blue dress, and a black carriage. On the back, someone had written, "Mrs. Finch, St. Bartholomew's Foundling Hospital, London." Lord Ashcombe reached for the paper. Marianne pulled it away. "You will touch no more evidence." A gunshot sounded from the courtyard. Reeves rushed to the window. Below, Nathaniel was riding through the gates beside a black carriage. A frightened woman leaned from its door, holding a small boy against her chest. Viola cried out, "Samuel!" The carriage turned onto the river road, the same road leading toward a bridge destroyed by the previous week's floods. Marianne reached the courtyard before the stablemaster had saddled Julian's horse. "The carriage," she demanded. "Which team is fastest?" "The chestnut pair, Your Grace. But the river road is flooded. That is why Nathaniel chose it. He expects us to hesitate." Julian climbed onto the driver's box beside her. Captain Reeves and Viola entered the carriage with the coroner, while Sir Thomas remained behind to prevent Lord Ashcombe from destroying evidence. The chestnuts raced through the gates. Rain had turned the road into mud. Ahead, the black carriage appeared between the trees, swaying dangerously as Nathaniel whipped his horses toward the river. "He will kill them before he lets us reach them," Julian said. Marianne studied the road. She had traveled through these villages for years while treating tenants. Beyond the next hill, an abandoned mill path crossed the main road near the broken bridge. "Turn left at the stone marker. That path is too narrow. It will put us ahead of him." Julian obeyed. Branches struck the carriage as they descended through the woods. One wheel lifted over a buried root, nearly throwing Viola from her seat. Reeves held the door closed, while Marianne kept the horses moving. They emerged onto the river road just as Nathaniel's carriage approached. The bridge ahead had lost its central span. Floodwater thundered between the broken supports. Marianne pulled their carriage across the road. Nathaniel fired. The bullet struck the driver's lantern. Glass exploded beside Julian's face, and the chestnuts reared. Nathaniel's driver tried to turn, but the black carriage slid sideways in the mud. Its rear wheel collapsed. Mrs. Finch was thrown through the open door, still holding Samuel. Marianne jumped down and ran toward them. Nathaniel seized the boy first. "One step closer and I throw him into the river." Samuel could not have been more than 5. He wore only a nightshirt beneath a wool blanket. A small birthmark curved beneath his left ear. Viola saw it and stopped breathing. Her own mother had possessed the same mark. "Samuel," she whispered. The boy looked at her without recognition. Nathaniel dragged him toward the broken bridge. "Give me Lord Ashcombe's letter." Marianne held up the folded document. "Release the child. Put it on the ground." She lowered the letter toward the mud, but kept her eyes on Samuel. The boy's lips were pale, and his breathing came in shallow bursts. "He is ill," Marianne said. "You carried him into the rain after keeping him near aconite." Nathaniel glanced down involuntarily. Marianne lunged. She caught Samuel's blanket and pulled him free as Nathaniel fired again. Julian struck Nathaniel from the side. Both men fell near the edge of the broken bridge. The soaked earth collapsed beneath them. Julian caught a stone support with one hand. Nathaniel clung to his coat, dragging them both toward the river. "Marianne!" Julian shouted. She placed Samuel in Viola's arms, seized the carriage rope, and threw one end toward Julian. Nathaniel reached for it. Marianne pulled it away from him. "Take my hand," Julian ordered. "Well." "If I release him, he dies, and if you do not, you both die." For 1 second, Julian looked at the man who had corrupted his household, endangered Arthur, and helped turn him against his wife. Then he gripped the rope with both hands. Nathaniel tore away a strip of Julian's coat as he fell into the flood. Reeves and the coroner pulled Julian onto solid ground. Nathaniel surfaced once, struck a broken timber, and vanished beneath the water. Marianne examined Samuel. His pulse was weak but regular. The marks on his arms suggested repeated doses of a sedative, not aconite. Mrs. Finch crawled toward Viola. "I tried to protect him. Lord Ashcombe said he would kill us both if I spoke." "Will you testify?" Marianne asked. The nurse looked at the coroner standing beside them. "Yes." Hoofbeats approached from the direction of Ashcombe House. Sir Thomas arrived with several constables, but Lord Ashcombe was not among their prisoners. He escaped through a private tunnel, Sir Thomas said. He has taken Crowther's missing documents and is riding to London. Why London? Julian asked. To address Parliament this afternoon. He intends to announce Arthur's death and accuse the Duchess of poisoning him before we can present the truth. Marianne wrapped Samuel more tightly and rose. Then we will reach Parliament first. Viola looked at her father's letter, now dissolving in the rain where Marianne had dropped it. The proof is ruined. No, Marianne said. She drew the original ledger page from inside her bodice, then looked at Mrs. Finch, Samuel, the coroner, and Julian. This time the proof will speak. By noon, Marianne stood outside Westminster in a smoke-stained gown, carrying enough evidence to destroy 2 families, including her own. Sir Thomas had sent riders ahead. The coroner traveled with Mrs. Finch and Samuel, while Captain Reeves guarded Viola. Julian sat opposite Marianne in the carriage, but did not ask for forgiveness. For once, he seemed to understand that regret gave him no right to comfort. Lord Ashcombe had arrived first. Inside the parliamentary committee chamber, he addressed a gathering of peers, magistrates, and newspaper reporters. He announced that Arthur Blackmere was dead, poisoned by the Duchess, after learning Julian intended to remove her from the succession. The room erupted when Arthur entered alive. Dr. Hale had brought him from Blackmere under armed protection. A bruise marked the boy's cheek, but he walked directly to Marianne and placed his hand in hers. Lord Ashcombe's expression changed for only a second. Then he smiled. A sick child has clearly been manipulated. He was abducted by your solicitor, Marianne said. Captain Reeves arrested Edwin Crowther in the cellar beneath Blackmere. Ashcombe turned toward the reporters. Crowther acted independently after becoming obsessed with my daughter. Then why was your grandson hidden at Ashcombe House for 5 years? Viola entered with Samuel. Whispers spread across the chamber as Mrs. Finch testified that she had attended Viola's secret confinement. She described how Lord Ashcombe separated mother and child, falsified the infant's death, and ordered her to raise Samuel in isolation. Ashcombe dismissed her as a disgruntled servant. Marianne presented the chapel inventory and the ledger page recording Arthur's coffin. The coroner confirmed the aconite bottle and the attempt to burn Bess inside the chapel. Dr. Hale testified that Bess and Arthur had suffered identical symptoms. Still, Ashcombe remained composed. All these documents carry Blackmere's seal, he said. Perhaps the Duke and Duchess created this spectacle together to hide their domestic scandal. Julian rose. No, Marianne did not create the scandal. I did. The chamber fell silent. I gave Lady Viola access to my seal. I permitted Crowther to alter Arthur's settlement, and I chose political ambition over my wife's warnings. When Arthur fell ill, I accused Marianne without examining the evidence because I resented her for failing to give me a son. Marianne felt every gaze turned toward her. Julian continued. Before my household, I threatened her with execution. Those crimes belong to Lord Ashcombe's conspiracy. The betrayal that enabled them belongs to me. It was the first truth Julian had spoken without protecting himself. Lord Ashcombe's smile disappeared. Viola stepped forward next. She admitted falsely accusing Marianne and claiming to carry Julian's child. She also produced the fabricated marriage contract and identified Nathaniel's glove. I believed my father intended only to remove the Duchess, she said. I chose not to ask what would happen to her afterward. Samuel watched her from Mrs. Finch's arms, still unaware that she was his mother. Ashcombe looked at his daughter with contempt. A jealous woman will confess to anything after being rejected. Arthur tugged Marianne's hand. I saw Lady Viola hide the bottle, he whispered. Marianne knelt beside him. Are you certain? Viola closed her eyes. He is. She confessed that Crowther had ordered her to place the vial behind St. Michael. She had known Arthur would be made ill, though she claimed she never expected him to die. The committee chairman ordered constables to detain her. Marianne did not intervene. Viola had helped save Samuel, but one brave act could not erase her deliberate cruelty. 2 constables moved toward Lord Ashcombe. He raised one hand. Before you accept the Duchess as an innocent woman, perhaps you should examine her husband's own sworn petition. His solicitor distributed copies across the chamber. Marianne read the first page. 6 weeks earlier, Julian had petitioned to separate from her on grounds of cruelty, instability, and attempted harm to Arthur. The document gave him control of her medical trust, removed her guardianship rights, and authorized her confinement in a private asylum. Julian's signature appeared at the bottom. This one was genuine. You said you had not decided, Marianne whispered. Julian could not meet her eyes. Lord Ashcombe faced the reporters. The Duke of Blackmere believed his wife dangerous long before Arthur was poisoned. Ask him why. Then the chairman looked directly at Marianne. Your Grace, is there any independent witness who can prove these accusations against you? were planned before your husband signed this petition? The chamber doors opened. Bess Turner entered, carrying the 3 pages stolen from Marianne's medical ledger, and beside her walked someone Julian had believed dead for 7 years. The woman beside Bess lifted her veil. Julian gripped the edge of the table. Eleanor? Lady Eleanor Vale had been declared dead 7 years earlier after the carriage accident that killed her husband. Arthur had been found alive beside the wreckage, wrapped in his mother's cloak. Now she crossed the chamber toward her son. Arthur stared at her until Eleanor knelt and revealed the crescent-shaped scar across her palm. "You gave me that when you broke Mother's blue vase," she whispered. "You tried to hide the pieces beneath my pillow." "Mother!" Eleanor opened her arms. Arthur ran into them. Even the reporters fell silent as she held the child she had believed she would never see again. Lord Ashcombe stepped backward. "This woman is an impostor. She is my sister," Julian said. "I know her." Eleanor faced the committee. Her voice was weak but steady. "The carriage accident was no accident. My husband discovered that Lord Ashcombe and Edwin Crowther were stealing from Arthur's inheritance. Our driver was bribed to take the cliff road. My husband died, but I survived. She had awakened inside a private asylum under another woman's name. Ashcombe's physician declared her delusional whenever she spoke of Arthur or Blackmere. 6 months earlier, Bess had visited the asylum to see her own aunt. Eleanor recognized the Blackmere crest on the maid's coat and secretly gave her a letter for Marianne. Before Bess could deliver it, Crowther discovered their contact and arranged Eleanor's supposed death from fever. Bess helped her escape and hid her in her mother's cottage. "I stole these pages after Lady Viola dismissed me," Bess said, placing Marianne's missing medical records before the committee. Mr. Crowther had marked the passages describing Master Arthur's symptoms. He used them to choose a poison that would make the Duchess appear responsible. The dates proved Arthur had been ill before Julian signed the separation petition, and before Marianne supposedly placed poison in his tonic. Eleanor produced one final document, a letter Lord Ashcombe had sent to the asylum superintendent 6 weeks earlier. "Once Blackmere signs the petition, transfer Lady Eleanor to the Northern Ward. Neither sister must be permitted to appear before the guardianship hearing." Marianne read the sentence aloud. Lord Ashcombe lunged for the letter. Captain Reeves seized him before he reached the table. The committee chairman ordered Ashcombe's immediate arrest for conspiracy, fraud, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder. Crowther was brought from custody and, faced with Eleanor's survival and Ashcombe's abandonment, surrendered the remaining financial ledgers. The records traced every step of the scheme. The sabotage of Eleanor's carriage, theft from Arthur's inheritance, purchase of aconite, falsified settlements, payment for Arthur's coffin, and plans to place Samuel over Blackmere. Nathaniel's body was recovered from the river 2 days later. Crowther received imprisonment in exchange for full testimony. Lord Ashcombe was stripped of his political offices and sent to trial. His seized property funded compensation for Eleanor, Samuel, Bess, and the tenants whose money he had stolen. Viola confessed publicly. The court considered her cooperation in Samuel's rescue, but it did not excuse her actions. She was convicted of conspiracy, falsifying evidence, and administering poison. Samuel remained temporarily with Mrs. Finch, while Eleanor helped secure an independent guardianship for him. Viola could write to her son, but she could not claim him until the court judged her safe. Then the committee turned to Julian. He surrendered his parliamentary seat before it could be taken from him. Before the same witnesses who had heard his accusations, he named every wrong without blaming Viola, Ashcombe, or his desire for an heir. "I humiliated my wife, threatened her life, surrendered her work to another woman, and signed a petition designed to imprison her. Others exploited my resentment, but they did not create it. I chose not to question them, because their lies served what I wanted." He withdrew the petition, restored Marianne's medical trust, and transferred its control permanently to her. He also signed a legal separation, granting her independent residence, income, and authority over the Blackmere clinics. Marianne's reputation was cleared by formal parliamentary declaration. 3 months later, she reopened the estate dispensary under a new name, the Eleanor and Arthur Hospital for Women and Children. Bess became its household supervisor, while Dr. Hale remained only after admitting publicly that fear had silenced him. Eleanor returned to Blackmere, not as a dependent, but as Arthur's mother and legal guardian. Julian lived in the northern house, separated from the family whose trust he had broken. He funded the hospital and repaired the tenants' cottages without placing his name on either. He asked Marianne for nothing. On the hospital's opening morning, he found her beneath the carved stone archway where he had once ordered guards to confine her. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "That is the first honest expectation you have had of me. Is there any future in which you return to Blackmere?" Marianne looked through the open doors. Arthur was helping Eleanor arrange flowers in the reception hall. Bess was directing servants, and patients already waited beside the new examination rooms. "I have returned to Blackmere," she said, "but not to you." Pain crossed Julian's face. He bowed and stepped aside. Marianne entered the hospital carrying the same leather herb journal he had thrown onto the banquet table. Its damaged brass clasp had been repaired, but the mark from that night remained visible. She placed it on her own desk, opened to a clean page, and began writing her name.